Hello and welcome to another motorcycling video. For context, I've just finished a run. I jumped on my bike and I'm on my way home, but I'm taking a bit of a drive around town while I'm doing it. So you may see some scenery that you've seen in other videos before. Hopefully you'll enjoy the scenery. Lovely sunny days. You can see the vision is clear, the sky is clear. There were a few spots of rain when I was running, but not enough to make anyone get wet and certainly not enough to affect the road. Now I'm going to talk about the road toll and road safety in this video. And if you have some thoughts on the things that I have to say, then at the end of the video, leave your comments in the appropriate place, and when I become aware of them, I will respond to them. I want to be clear from the outset that I am not a road safety expert, and I'm not presenting myself that way. I'm just a bloke who rides a motorcycle and drives a car and talks about road safety because it's something that interests me. The road toll is a matter that we should all be concerned about, and no matter what the number is, it's probably too high. I don't know the exact number of deaths on New South Wales or on Australian roads in the last calendar year 2025, but whatever it is, the number's too high. The number of people injured in accidents is probably too high, and the number of cars damaged in road accidents is probably too high. And every state and territory is now working towards the Towards Zero program, which aims to reduce the road toll to zero. I think that's a nice aspiration, but I think realistically we have to accept that we probably will never get to a zero road toll. We can only try and reduce the road toll, and I think that's a good thing, because one death is one death too many. It's a tragedy for a family when somebody loses a loved one in a road accident. It's a tragedy for a family when someone is seriously or even has a minor injury in a road accident, and it's a cost to the community in terms of the health system, and it's a cost to the individual in terms of damage to their car and their property, which is paid for through insurance premiums and so forth. I think it's also fair to say that despite what I've just said, and despite the road toll, whatever it is, that as a general rule, driving in Australia is a relatively safe activity. And I say that because if you consider the population, which is about 27 million, you consider how many vehicles there are on Australian roads, and I don't know the full number, but it's claimed that there are something like 20 million light passenger and commercial vehicles. So that's the cars that you and I drive. And when you consider the distances between some of our major population centres, the number of kilometres that are driven per year by Australians overall must be in the billions. So the road deaths, while one death is too many, I think when you factor all that in, we'd say, well, driving is still a relatively safe activity. But having said all that, there ought to be measures to reduce the road toll, and we ought to support all those measures to reduce the road toll. Now, to me, there are four factors that influence the road toll. One of those factors, and I'll deal with that one first, is the one that we have absolutely no control over, and that's the weather. So if you look at today, it's a bright sunny day. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning. There are some clouds in the sky, but it's a lovely clear day. Visibility is good. As I said, there have been a few spots of rain, but the road isn't slippery. But that's not always the case. Obviously at night, driving is different because it's dark, and no matter how many light bars and so on you put on your vehicle, driving is different at night. In the mornings when the sun hasn't quite risen, it's not yet sunrise, there's that period when it's difficult to see, and especially for those motorists who don't put on their headlights. It's the same in the afternoon when it's dusk but it's not sundown yet, so some people don't put on their headlights and they're hard to see. There's days when it's foggy, there's days when it's raining, there's days when there's ice on the road, there's days when it's slippery on the roads because it's rained and there's oil on the road and so forth. And when all of those things happen, they're all the result of the weather, which we cannot control, but we can control how we drive. And so when it's wet, perhaps we need to drive a little bit slower. When you're driving east, just like I am at the moment, and the sun is blinding straight into your eyes, perhaps you need to drive a little bit slower just till you get through that section. When you're driving west in the afternoon to get home and the sun is blaring through the windscreen at you, as it is for everybody else that's going the same way, perhaps you need to adjust your driving. When it's dark, when it's foggy, you need to adjust your driving behaviour just a little bit. It might mean that you have to take an extra 5 minutes to get to your destination, but getting to your destination safe and in one piece is much better than getting there dead on time, but getting there dead or getting there catastrophically injured or something like that. So the weather, number one factor, we can't control it, but we can control how we react and how we drive in different sorts of weather conditions. And there's nothing wrong with saying, well, I need to drive a little bit slower because the road's slippery, or I need to drive a little bit slower because there's heavy rain, and although the windscreen wipers work perfectly, visibility's not as good as I'd like it to be, so I'll just drive a little bit slower. And if the rain came tumbling down so heavily, there's no harm necessarily in saying, well, I'll just pull over to the side of the road until the rain stops for a few moments. So weather, number one factor, and one that we have no control over. Number one factor that we do have control over is the infrastructure. And the infrastructure means the roads that we drive on. So the roads, the motorways, the tollways, the freeways, whatever word you want to use for them, the bridges, the tunnels, all of the stuff that we drive our cars on, that's the infrastructure. And without a doubt, the roads should be maintained to a safe standard. What is a safe standard? Well, I suppose that depends, first of all, on how much traffic uses the road. But as a minimum, I would think that there should be a good, firm, strong, properly made, wide enough shoulder for people to be able to stand on it or park their car on it and have room for the vehicles to pass them. There should be markings on the road that show you which side of the road you're supposed to be on, so that when the person comes the other way, they know which side of the road they're supposed to be on, and the chance of you having a head-on collision are nil, because there's a line, just like there is here, that clearly marks that. If there are potholes in the road, they should be filled. The motorcyclists in Victoria who were protesting against the state of the roads and the number of potholes were doing so not because they want to be a pain in the neck, but because if a motorcycle hits a pothole, the result can be catastrophic. You've only got two wheels and they're one behind the other. So the front wheel hits the pothole, the back wheel is going to go there as two. If it's a deep pothole, the forks are going to dip, the weight's all going to go forward, then the forks are going to rebound and the weight's going to go somewhere and the bike's probably going to fall over. And the worst case scenario, you are travelling at 100 kilometres an hour, which with the speed limit on a road, you hit a pothole and the next thing you're on the road and you're catastrophically or injured. So people, motorcyclists in particular, whinging about the state of roads and the potholes in the road aren't doing so to be a nuisance, they're doing so because it is a genuine safety issue. One of the things that I think is a problem with roads and road maintenance in Australia is that it doesn't matter who maintains the road, whether it's a Commonwealth government joint effort because it's a national highway, or a state government one because it's a road in the state, or it's a local road that the council or the state government pay the council. It's still your dollars. It's still ratepayer or taxpayer dollars that fund that road. But when you hear announcements from state governments that they're going to build a new motorway or ring road around the city, and it's going to take so many cars off suburban roads, and it's going to reduce travel time by so much and so forth, but it's going to cost $1 billion and take 10 years to build and so on. When you hear about those things, there's a certain amount of money for roads. There's not an infinite bucket of money, and there's not a magic pudding where you can just go and keep finding money. There's a certain amount of money, and when the money is allocated for these huge motorway projects in cities, it means that there's less money for funding road repair in outside of those cities. Now, that's not to say those things in the city shouldn't be built, because reducing traffic congestion and taking cars off suburban streets is a good thing, but it means that there's a compromise. And it means that there's less money available for the rural road, or the non-metropolitan road, should I say. At one stage, the funding of roads in Australia was done through fuel excise, but that hasn't been the case for a long time. It's just funded out of general revenue. And I suspect that no matter how much money government spent or how they spent their money, there simply wouldn't ever be enough money to maintain the roads to the standard they have to be, because natural disasters, flooding, those sorts of things affect the roads. More cars on the road means more damage to the roads, and it's true that cars are getting heavier, especially EVs, that are by definition heavier than combustion engine vehicles of about the same capacity, and the heavier the vehicle, the more damage there is to the road. But so problem number one issue that we can control in reducing the road toll is having good roads that are well signposted, that are well marked with down the middle, that rumble strips are on them where they're appropriate, there are guardrails where they're appropriate, traffic flows smoothly, there's a good line of vision. Where possible, trees are cut back a little bit from the road so that they don't hang over and cause that darkness and shadowing and dappling effect that is a problem sometimes. That's not to say I want you to cut down all the trees on the side of the road. No, I'm not suggesting that at all. Intersections are well designed so that the vision in every direction is clear. Markings are clear in terms of signs for giveways or stops or whatever it is. All of those things affect the road toll. Number 2 of the variables that we do have control of and do have an effect on the road toll are the vehicles that we drive. Now, I think it's fair to say that probably in the last 5 or 6, maybe 10 years, our vehicles have become safer than they've ever been, which doesn't mean they're perfect or they're as safe as they will ever be, but they're safer than they have ever been to this point. But if you think back even to the late 60s when seatbelts became compulsory and then headrests became compulsory to stop whiplash, and then cars had to have crumple zones and impact absorption areas, and disc brakes became the standard in vehicles, and even something as basic as a heated demister became a standard feature in the car, so that you didn't have to keep wiping the windscreen down with the back of your hand, and you could see clearly, even though the weather outside was foggy or whatever, the windscreen wasn't fogging up. So a whole lot of safety features have come into cars, some of those active systems and some passive systems, and there is some argument now to say that this ADAS, Advanced Driver Assistance Systems that are in cars, may not be contributing to the safety of the vehicle. But let's think about this from not necessarily the point of view of the driver who is annoyed by the beeps and bongs all the time, but think about it from the point of view of the people who are outside the car. So if you're in your EV, for example, or you're in your full SUV or your ute and you have the windows wound up and you've got your podcast going or something and you're concentrating on your drive, and you're not necessarily picking up a lot of outside noise because cars are very well soundproof these days, the beep that warns you that there's something in the left lane when you're about to make a left turn, something you can't see because it's a pedestrian or it's a motorcyclist or it's a cyclist. That beep is a lifesaver for the person you could have collected, you could have run over. The advanced autonomous emergency braking that sees that the vehicle in front of you is slowing down, and that before you can react, the vehicle has started to slow itself down. The adaptive cruise control that realises the vehicle in front of you is slowing down. It wants to keep your cruise control operating, but adjust the speed so that the following distance between you and the vehicle in front is the same, so that the person in front doesn't get rear-ended. Gives a signal through the tail lights that you're slowing down, so the person behind knows that you're slowing down and you don't get rear-ended. Those are all helpful for the people around you, not only the people in the car, but the people outside of the car who may be affected by your judgments. You're driving home late at night and you're getting a bit drowsy and you've been driving for a long time and you're thinking about dinner and you're not concentrating on the road the way you should be, and the lane keeper assist is dragging you back into your lane because you're getting drowsy and you're wandering away. That's saving you from ending up in the ditch. It's saving you from crossing the double line, the centre line of the road here and colliding, having a head-on collision. It's saving you from wandering over into the left lane in a dual carriageway and colliding with the car that's coming up in the left lane that you weren't aware that you were there because you weren't paying attention to the road and you turned off all those beeping things. The alarm that goes off that tells you are drifting out of your lane, they're all good things in terms of protecting you, but also in terms of protecting other vulnerable road users who don't have the same degree of protection that you do. The motorcyclist, the pedestrian, the cyclist, who, as I said, are vulnerable road users and rely on you to be alert, and this day and age rely on your vehicle to be alert to say to you, listen, there's something in that left lane. Before you change, check the mirror. Before you change lanes and make that left turn, there's already somebody in that lane. Before you open the car door, there's a cyclist coming up that you could knock off their bike and perhaps even knock into the traffic and have them killed. So those systems are important. As an aside, ANCAP, which does the safety assessment for Australian vehicles and awards a number of stars or whatever, it says it does not require the audible warnings. It doesn't require the vehicle to have the beeps and bongs. It says it would be satisfied with a visual warning, but the problem is with so many idiot lights or visual warnings that you just see a whole bunch of lights and you don't know what they mean. But if you have an audible sound as well, that's two ways of gathering your attention, and the audible sound is going to make you look at the dash and see, well, what does this light mean? And it's going to show you vulnerable road user or lane keeper alert or somebody on the blind spot or whatever it is. So the second factor in reducing the road toll is the quality of the cars that we drive. Now, it's also true that the median age of Australian vehicles is about 11 years. In other words, we keep our cars for a fairly long time. So there will be lots of vehicles who don't have those advanced safety systems in them. Mine, for example, the 2010 Toyota Camry has none of those things. And there'll be lots of other vehicles like that as well. But then there's the issue of the roadworthiness of the vehicle that you drive. In all states of Australia, other than New South Wales, you are required to have an annual inspection of your vehicle before it's registered to make sure that it is roadworthy. In most other states, you only have to provide a roadworthy certificate when you sell the vehicle. So what happens in New South Wales is after your vehicle is 5 years old, more than 5 years old, when you get the registration renewal, you are told that an inspection is required, and you take it to an authorised inspection station and they check it and make sure the tyres have got enough tread on, make sure the brakes work, make sure all the lights work, make sure the windscreen wipers and washers work. They do some other tests and so forth, and then they give you a certificate that says your vehicle is roadworthy. If your vehicle is not roadworthy, they give you a statement that says these are the things that need to be done, and you need to get those things done before you then can get the roadworthy and register your vehicle. In other states, as I understand, and certainly it's the case in Tasmania, you get the renewal, you pay the renewal, and you're back on the road. And the only time you would find out that your vehicle wasn't roadworthy, unless you were a scrupulously honest person who goes around and checks all those things every time before you get in the car, is if the police pull you up and say your tyres are bald or your headlights out or your tail lights out or whatever. Some cases they will give you a defect notice, which means you've got to get that thing repaired. In some cases your car is so badly unroadworthy they will say you have to leave this here, mate. Call your mate to get home tonight because you're not driving this car anywhere, and you have to get those things fixed before the car can be considered roadworthy again. Now, whether all the states should go to the New South Wales model or not, I don't know. I personally think it's a good idea. I don't object to having to take my car. The cost is, I think it's $36 for the motorcycle and maybe $50 or $56 for the car, and providing there's no work to be done. I think that's a reasonable thing to say. Well, at least once a year I've had my vehicle checked and the tyres have all got good tread on them and the brakes work and the horn works and the windscreen wipers work and so on and so forth. So, second variable that we can control in terms of reducing the road tolls in the quality of the cars that we drive. And if your car is an older vehicle and doesn't have all those ADAS things, then at least making sure that your vehicle is roadworthy and has regular servicing and is checked for its roadworthiness, perhaps at least once a year. Now, the third factor is the most difficult one, and that is the person that drives the vehicle. If you are a regular viewer of YouTube or any other video social media, or you're a Facebook user, you've probably seen at least one dash cams of. Every major metropolitan centre in Australia has a social media group of some sort, whether it's on Facebook or somewhere else, where there's dash cams of Launceston or dash cams of Brisbane or Adelaide or wherever it is. And what happens there is people have a dash cam in their car, they record things that happen on the road and they send it to the Facebook group who publish them. And you see some extraordinarily stupid, dumb and dangerous things happening on the roads. And to be honest, they're not all done by learner drivers, and they're not all done by provisional licensed drivers. They're sometimes done by drivers with full licences who just don't seem to either know the road rules or don't care what the road rules are or don't think about what they're doing before they do it. One classic that I've seen 2 or 3 times in some of this recent dash cam footage is a situation like this where I'm in the left lane of a 2-lane road and I'm proceeding along at the speed limit or whatever once I get past this roundabout here, and you'll see that on the left of me there is a shoulder, and I have seen 2 or 3 dashcam examples of where people have come up on the inside of me on that shoulder and passed the driver in the lane because they're impatient and they can't get past the proper way, so they just do that. Not only is that illegal, it is dangerous. You see sometimes people are in the left lane like this, the lane beside them that they want to be in because it has the turning arrow and they know they've got to turn. They don't get into the correct lane until it's almost too late, and then they cut across the traffic. Or they're in the right lane as if that has an arrow on it that says that they've got to turn, and at the last minute they realise they don't want to turn and they cut across the traffic in the left lane, sometimes without signalling. You see people, and we know this happens, going through red lights. That's why we have red light cameras. You see people who don't obey stop signs. You see people who don't understand how to use a roundabout properly. We see people who don't understand what a give way sign means, and all of those things are dangerous and not only put your own life at risk, but put at risk the life of other people who are on the road. When you have a driver's licence, you are required to obey the road rules. You are required by law to follow that, and ignorance of the law is never an excuse. But then there's the compact that says we all want to get where we're going and back home to where we started from safely. And I'm a good driver, and you're a good driver, but we don't know about the bloke in the other car behind us. We don't know whether he's a good driver or not, or she's a good driver. And it's usually when we don't know that person that there's an accident. I think we have a pretty good system of graded licensing in Australia with the learner's plate, where you have to do somewhere between 100 and 120 hours of driving before you can go for your practical driving test. And that driving has to be on all sorts of roads and all sorts of conditions, at night, at daytime, in rainy weather if possible, on major roads, on single lane roads, and so forth. And you have to have a fully licensed driver with you, not someone on a provisional license, but a fully licensed driver. And a logbook has to be kept, and I assume that's kept online these days, and the fully licensed driver has to provide their license number to say that they accompanied you on the drive that you are logging to say that you did. After you've got passed your driving test, you get a provisional license, which is a red P, and I think you have that for 2 years. And when you have that, there are restrictions on the hours at which you can drive. There's a curfew, and I think you have to be off the roads by a certain time. It might be 6 o'clock at night. There's a limit to the number of people you can have in your vehicle, and there's also a very long list of vehicles that you cannot drive. Vehicles with turbochargers and vehicles with superchargers and so on, you cannot drive them when you are a provisional licensed driver. After you've had your red provisional licence for, I think it's 2 years, you then get your green provisional licence, and you have that for a year. Some of those restrictions are eased, and the speed at which you can drive is increased, I think, to 100 kilometres an hour. But still there are restrictions on the cars you can drive and so on. And then you get a full licence. We have a series of penalties with demerit points and fines and all those sort of things to discourage people from breaking the law, or perhaps to encourage them by saying, if you obey the law, you won't have to pay this fine. If you drive safely, you won't have any demerit points, and you'll have your full suite of demerit points every year, and you'll never have to worry about having your licence suspended or something like that. We have laws that say you're not allowed to drive while your judgment is impaired by alcohol or drugs, and there are fairly severe penalties. In fact, I think in most states now, even a low range PCA or drug driving test positive will result in a suspension of licence. So there are some thoughts on the road toll and what we should do about it. Drive safely when you're out there, ride safely when you're out there, avoid the potholes if you're a motorcyclist. Have a good day, and if you have a comment, leave it at where it should be, and I'll respond to it when I become aware. Thanks for watching and listening.